Armando, and today I would like to talk about the differences between the Suzuki method and the traditional method when we want to learn music, piano or violin or any instrument. The Suzuki method was originated in Japan after World War II by Dr. Shinichi Suzuki, and he realized that the children could speak their native language based on the mother tongue method, which is listening over and over and repeating. The same way you learn how to say mama or papa. And he applied that into music. Children listen to the CD of the instrument they're going to play, and they repeat by ear, and they learn how to speak the language of music without any accent, which is a revolution, one of the greatest discovery. There's a huge difference because in the Suzuki method, you can start as young as 1 or 2, 3 years old, and the parents will also learn how to play the instrument so they can be the teacher at home. So we all speak the same language. You do not do this in traditional. In traditional, first you have to learn how to read music. So you're usually 5 or 6 years old. And then your parent is usually not learning the instrument. And even sometimes they are not at the lesson. Usually in traditional, parents drop their kids at the lesson and have no clue what's happening. Not in the real Suzuki method. I say real Suzuki method because there are many schools in this country who don't do it exactly as it is in Japan. You have to do it as it is if you want it to work fully. Another great thing about the Suzuki method is that when we learn an entire book, which is in violin, for example, 17 classical pieces, by heart, with all the dynamics, all the details, when they can play this 25 minutes performance from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to the Gazette Gavotte, which is now a real classical piece, children go through a graduation, and if they can play everything perfectly by heart, they will move on to book 2, and we will still review book 1. And when students are in book 10, they know hundreds of concertos and gavotte and minuets and pieces, and they learn how to get better on things they already know how to do. So to explain that, if a child is in book 4, finally their book 1 is going to sound as good as their teacher's performance. And in Japan, they call that learning. It's mastering something. We do not do that in the, I would say, traditional method. When you learn one piece and once you know it, you move on to the next one without really reviewing what you already know. I know all of this because I grew up in the French conservatory, and in the French conservatory, that's exactly what we did. My parents were not at the lesson. I started around the age of 5, first to learn how to read music. And then when I learned a piece in violin, I never get back and reviewed it. Once it was learned, we would just move on to the next one. Finally, the Suzuki method, it's more like a philosophy. We call it the Suzuki philosophy because the main goal of our method is not just to teach the child and the parents and learning and starting very young. The main job of the Suzuki method is to develop the child as a whole and create this connection between the parent and the child through music. And it's beyond the music learning. It's more about the humanity of it and how we can change children's life in a positive way. So the Suzuki method is a drastic different method than the traditional. Now, the Suzuki method has been criticized not to use enough scales and theory and techniques. And it's true that in the old days, the Suzuki teacher will only do the Suzuki books, but not in our school. And most Suzuki teachers today, they know that they need to do the scales, and we studied the exact same technique books they studied at the conservatory on a traditional method. And to make a more complete method, we basically mix both of them together. And the Suzuki method, those books in piano or violin or guitar, they are basically using all the famous classical pieces we study at the conservatory, and they put them in order. They made a beautiful CD for each book. And so basically, if you think Suzuki method and traditional, which one is the best? Depending what you're looking for, but personally, as somebody who's studying the classical method, I can say that with the Suzuki method, every child can learn. As Suzuki said, every child can learn to be great. And there is so much more to learn, I feel, as far as the philosophy when you do the Suzuki method. And of course, as the children get more advanced, we move forward to something more traditional, still respecting the tradition of the Suzuki method, but we start working on more complex things like techniques books and etude books that are studied at the conservatory. So that's kind of like the difference, which is a big difference when you think about it, between the Suzuki method that originated in Japan and now is played everywhere in the world, and then the classical traditional method that was born in Europe, which is a method I grew up with, which I respect. But I believe for teaching children, all children of all ages, I will definitely go with the Suzuki method.